Hi, my name is John Light, and I've spent over 20 years working throughout all corners of the recruiting world. Our podcast, Drowning in the Tech Talent Pool, is a resource to help you stay afloat and get ahead of your competition. And welcome to another episode of Drowning in the Tech Talent Pool. I'm your host, John Light, President and CEO of Sabretooth Recruiting. And today, guesting with us is Nick Jain, the CEO of a company called IdeaScale. And I got to admit, Nick, when I saw the name of the company, I was like, I have to talk to him. I got to find out what this is. Thanks so much for joining us today. And by way of introduction, tell us a little bit about yourself and about IdeaScale.
Sure. So I'm Nick. I originally grew up in a mix of Canada and India and came to the United States for college, about 15, 16 years ago. I spent the first half of my career in private equity and hedge funds in New York, doing the typical finance thing, investing in companies in a variety of different industries. And about 4 or 5 years ago, more due to luck than anything else, I fell into an executive for hire role. So where either private companies or private equity firms would hire me to run companies. First, I started out by running about $150 million revenue trucking and warehousing company, then a small e-commerce shoe startup. And about a year and a half ago, I was brought on to lead IdeaScale as CEO. IdeaScale is a really interesting company. It was founded about 15 years ago, coming out of a White House initiative in the Obama administration. And what we do is we are basically a CRM for ideas. So in the same way that you would take your customer data and put it into a database like HubSpot or Salesforce, we take your idea data that's otherwise going to be stuck on a Post-it note or on a whiteboard or on an Excel spreadsheet somewhere and put it into basically a social media application. Our customers include large organizations such as NASA, McKinsey, Comcast, basically large complex organizations that need a way to aggregate and collect all the greatest ideas from all of their employees, regardless of where they sit in the world or in the organization, and then prioritize and iterate on those ideas till they become, reality for those organizations.
Wow. Okay. CRM for ideas. I read a book and it's I think I say this about every fourth or fifth episode. I read a book, and it's right here on my bookcase on the other side behind my monitor, called Influencer. In fact, I'm looking at it. It's written by 4 or 5 people who are industrial organizational psychologist types. They really study people. And one of the neat anecdotes they relate is about innovation at 3M. And 3M gave us such original CRM materials like the Post-it pad. This is the CRM I've been using since the 90s, man. And what was interesting in it is it talks about how their scientists that they studied who were within 30 feet of each other had the highest rate of innovation. And then it cut in half for the ones that were within 60 feet. So between 30 feet and 60 feet. But one that was really struck me as interesting is once you got beyond 90 feet, you might have been miles apart. They're lower end of the innovation scale. And we live in a world today where technology binds us but separates us, or allows us to be separated. And we can choose to not be in the office. We can choose to not engage with a real person, which is tragic in my opinion. But when you start talking about innovation, how do you crack the code to where so people sitting miles apart are able to innovate together? And especially to your point, in complex organizations where you have layers and layers of people and bureaucracies and process and protocol. I find it very interesting that something like that, this A, existed out there, and B, how far you've taken it. And it's going to be going now with AI kind of in its advent stage and proliferating everywhere. So I'm curious, Nick, when you look at this, would you have, to kind of calibrate folks, would you have a success story or an anecdote that you could share? I mean, change the names and protect the guilty, innocent or whoever it might be, but something that would kind of get people calibrated, an example of IdeaScale in action.
Sure. So there's 2 types of primary use cases for our type of software. One is an organization collecting ideas from their employees for anything from what's a better snack to have in the break room to, hey, what should our next new product be? And the second is an organization reaching outside of itself to their broader stakeholder base. And that's what some of our government organizations do. I'll give I'll give an anonymized example. So one of the largest restaurant chains in the world wanted to figure out what their new menu items should be. And they realized they'd run out of ideas collecting from their chefs, from their internal employees, from the people making their menu. And so they came up with the idea, let's go talk to our tens of millions of customers out there who eat our food every day. And this is a very large fast food chain. And so they went out and created a public campaign using our software to ask their customers, what should our next item be? Should it be this type of burger, this type of taco, some sort of strange French fries? And so they got thousands and thousands of ideas from customers who already love their product and wanted to suggest what that next great thing should be on the menu that's going to keep them coming back to the restaurant. So they solicited thousands of ideas. They had, they voted on those ideas. Some of the ideas got refined within the platform, say, hey, we don't just want French fries. We want curly French fries that have purple coloring at. Yeah. And that product actually went on the menu and was quite successful for the restaurant.
No kidding. Huh. Kind of reminded me of that. Was it a crowdsourcing campaign they did for a tugboat or an icebreaker in Britain a few years ago? And they came up with Bodie McBoatface. And then you said purple curly fries. And I'm like thinking, purple, I don't know. Does that impact the flavor or the taste?
I said purple curly fries because that's something I actually made myself for my wife and I last week. But I can't reveal the actual menu item because unfortunately we're the company. We don't
it's anonymized. I get it. But were the curly fries good, the purple ones?
They were interesting looking, but they were candidly no better than just normal fries.
Okay. Kind of garnishy, but still there in terms of not going to set it apart. Okay. Hey, I'm all for it. You can't see the rest of me on the screen, but heaven knows I'm an aficionado of food at many different levels. So when you look at this at the IdeaScale platform, I'm curious to know is it driven like any other CRM, or how is AI impacting your platform's ability to not just help people innovate better, but to bring them together as well? Because a big part of innovation, in my opinion, is getting all these thoughts on the table, right? And you're going to have people who are really good at that and they lean in, and you're going to have other people who are kind of like, leave me alone. I'm going to go back to my whatever it was that's not this around other people.
Sure. So I think there's three types of ways that we've leveraged AI. One kind of older type and two that we've started adopting recently. The older type is the classical social media way. How do we show you ideas that are relevant to you so that when you log in, you can see the ideas that you feel that you are an expert commenter on, or interested on, or not both. That's no different than what Facebook or Reddit do. And then in the post-generative AI world, I think we've started to adopt a couple technologies. Although before I get into them, I want to comment that we are actually restricted in the types of AI we can adopt because a lot of our customers and organizations are themselves trying to figure out to what level they are comfortable with AI. So a lot of governments as well as large corporations have said, hey, let's put a pause on ChatGPT and generative AI and DALL-E until they understand it. Their CIOs or their legal teams have blocked it. So we're actually a bit limited in what we ourselves are allowed to implement because of what our customers are comfortable with. That being said, I think that there's two types of ways that we have really started to leverage AI or some of this generative AI technology. One is in the co-pilot approach. Like, you don't have to come up with ideas in a vacuum. You can bounce ideas back and forth with an AI, or conversely, if you have an idea in your head, but you don't have a good way to articulate it, the AI can help you write it in a fancy way, because that's often actually really a big barrier to people contributing their ideas. They think that they're going to sound dumb.
Like Bodie McBoatface.
Exactly, right? Like, I may have a great idea, but English may not be my first language, or I may just not be the most eloquent writer or speaker. I may have stage fright, right? The AI can help me speak very, very eloquently if I want. That's method one. You can either co-ideate within an AI, or alternatively, the AI can package the idea that is coming from your brain into a more eloquent way. And then the second way, this feature hasn't been released, but it's something that we've been kind of alpha testing out, is how do we use AI to summarize all this information? So you may have 100,000 ideas in our platform, but you may find themes amongst those ideas. So we run a public community for Tesla. They're not a customer of ours, it's disclosure. But let's imagine there's a whole bunch of ideas that Tesla enthusiasts are saying around the braking system. How do you do that when they're written in different languages, when they're written with referring to different features, to realize that, hey, our Tesla enthusiast community has a theme that they have a problem with the braking systems in Tesla. And that's something that we're kind of alpha testing out right now. to find common themes amongst the ideas that people are putting on our platform.
Interesting. So, that brings a thought to my mind is how do you, when you look at the IdeaScale CRM for innovation, I do like that tagline. I know it may drive some people nuts, but it's kind of cool because it immediately conjures, images and anchor points in your mind and your thought process. But when you do something like that for a Tesla or any big company, and they're probably already using something like Slack, is there a threat from a competitive standpoint that a message board company comes up with an AI that says, hey, warning, thematically, this is coming up, in your user group or internally or something of that nature? Because I would think message boards and things of that where there's unfettered, less inhibition around communication, I would think that'd be a prime ground to either A, embarrass people, or B, really understand what people are thinking at any given time.
So you're absolutely right. And there's a fundamental problem here that when you give people a voice, they will speak up. And sometimes they will say things that you don't want to hear or they shouldn't be saying. Mm-hmm. The upside is obviously you can tap into a much richer talent pool rather than just the 4 or 5 people who sit in corner offices in an organization and have power or the loudest voices. So that's often a practical challenge that we run into with our type of software, which is when you're encouraging either your internal employee base or external shareholders or stakeholders to have a voice, they may say something. They may say things that you are not excited to hear or you don't want to hear. And I don't mean offensive things. I just mean like no one likes being told, hey, this product sucks. Here's how you should improve it. So that's one of the things that we deal with in the education part of our sales process, which is like, look, if you're going to implement a solution like this, you need to understand that people will say things that you're uncomfortable with. And if you're not comfortable with that, then the software is perhaps not right for you. But then your organization may also have a bigger cultural problem, right? In organizations where people are afraid to speak up, that's organizations where innovation doesn't happen, where fraud often happens. There's few whistleblowers. So companies that are really successful in an innovation and transparency culture do listen to their employees' voices. And we really try and push both our paying customers, as well as we have a bunch of free customers to migrate towards a more open internal culture in their organization.
Yeah, and frankly, I think it's a good idea. It's hard when you put a lot of thought and effort and energy into a product or a service, and someone internally, and maybe someone who is on your team who reports to you, maybe 3 or 4 levels down or up or sideways or whatever, comes in and says, no, your idea is bad, or it's got this fatal conceit when you put it together, this fatal flaw. It never feels good. And I think there's a corresponding responsibility to take things in an emotionally level sense, I guess you could say. To your point, it could make people very uncomfortable.
So let me give a practical example of that. So I run a 100-person organization with people across the world in different departments. And I regularly, as CEO of the company, get told in public venues, whether it be Slack or using our own software on our CRM, that I'm wrong, right? In public venues, people are telling the CEO of the company that they're wrong, even a junior employee who joined like a month ago and is several levels below. And that's something we've embraced because we have said that the best idea wins, not the idea from the person with the most senior title. And we've kind of internally accepted that that's okay. And it doesn't hurt me. People realize that the CEO is imperfect, as is, the head of engineering, or conversely, it cuts the other way too, right? Where I tell a junior person they're wrong and I try and make a case for why they're wrong, and not on the merits of their argument or of their idea, not on the merits of, hey, I'm the boss, you got to do what I say.
I think it's an interesting proposition, and I don't know that it fits 100% of the time, but I think you could make it fit the vast majority of the time, where it's a meritocracy of ideas. And, of course, who's judging that meritocracy, right? That matters. But, to demonstrate that as a leader, I think culturally is a very big deal, not easy to do. So kudos to you and to the team.
Thank you.
And that brings me to another question. Drowning in the tech talent pool, thematically, we're really about the intersection of talent and tech. You know, how does talent and technology, how do they not just intersect, but how do companies manage? How do they process this intersection? How does it impact them? And on the other side of that, how does it impact their people? So I'm curious to learn a little bit more about when you look at your technology, the service that you're bringing to your customer base, how's it being impacted with all the evolutions we're seeing in the job market, the talent market right now, in terms of getting the level and depth of talent you need to not only keep the innovations flowing, so to speak, but also to take it into the future? Because I really believe personally, and I think there's data to back this up, at least from a job description standpoint, that people's jobs are changing and are changing pretty rapidly, maybe at a more rapid pace than we've seen in decades, maybe even 100 plus years. You see more and more job descriptions out there that have, for example, a hard skill, chemistry, electrical engineering, whatever it might be, and it's fused, for lack of a better term, with AI or machine learning. AI is machine learning. Machine learning is AI, a stage of it, but it's fused with this, or it's in addition to that, it's also fused with maybe having familiarity with a certain language like Python, or you can work in R or whatever it might be. And it doesn't mean you're an expert, but you're familiar with it. You kind of got an idea what good looks like in terms of coding or in terms of model structure and so on and so forth. So I'm curious, how are you navigating that?
Sure. So I think we face as our organization, we face two types of the problems that you allude to. One is dealing with one is kind of in a post-generative AI world related problem.
Mm-hmm.
And number two is a set of problems specific to the United States about the types of talent that are available here, especially after the last 2 years, where we've basically had, a decade of hypergrowth in technology and then a series of layoffs amongst both companies, large and small. Let me comment on the first one and then the second one. So the first one, generative AI. There's, a million podcasts, a million YouTube videos and Google articles about this. But the best analogy I can draw is it's a tool that is essential. And if you don't master it, these generative AI technologies, you won't have a job. And the best example of this I can give is, or the best analogy I can give is, early in my career, I was a carpenter. I used to build buildings. And if you showed up to work and you did not know how to use a hammer, you can't be a carpenter. You just don't have a job. There's a certain set of tools. If you do not have absolute mastery of them, you don't have a job. 10 or 15 years ago, having some basic, knowledge of mathematics, literacy, Excel, email was essential. And if you couldn't use email, you don't have a information worker job. I think generative AI, at least for us, is already there. Whether you're in our marketing department or our engineering department or our sales department, if you are not aggressively and actively using generative AI, you simply just don't have a job here. And I think more and more organizations, we're on the extreme end of that level of adoption or enforcement. I think other organizations are going to, over time, trend that way, where if you don't have this skill that is a basic skill set, you don't have a place in their organization. Does that make sense? And if so, can I move to the second half or second set of challenges that I mentioned?
Yeah, no, it makes sense. And I've noticed a trend that smaller, more nimble, agile companies, especially when a C-suite is closer to the line worker, if I can put it that way, tend to be moving for adoption faster. Now, I've seen some big companies moving, but I've seen some larger companies, C-suite level executives tell me point blank, yeah, no, not this year and probably not next year. And, and they have this whole universe of concern that has to pass through multiple gatekeepers versus, say you and your team sit down and gatekeeping clan is relatively small. So it's going to be, I think, very interesting. People ask me, what do you think is going to happen to my job or to this category or sector of jobs or whatever? And I'm pretty blunt with telling them, I don't know that anything material is going to happen to them today, but 3 to 5 years from now, that could become 100% on the other direction. And entire sectors could be changed radically, taken off the board. And the thing that's going to enable people to navigate that is being more digitized in their thinking, i.e., how can I apply, to your point, this tool? I think the carpenter analogy is a good one. Having said that, carpenters are also known, like a lot of the other trades, are also known for also having newer people in the trade come in and learn from a true master, from a really, really well-versed artisan. And I think companies need to try to embrace the idea of getting very good individually and then helping other people along. It's almost like you talk to a client and they're like, I don't want to hire anybody who's not a digital native. And then I'm looking at, well, why are you willing to pay me a $20,000 retainer? I'm not a digital native. Well, you were recommended, or, you've done it before or whatever. And I'm like, well, don't disqualify people before you have a chance to really understand what it is you need, because you may not need the person who's been taught to think like everyone else who's 27 years old. You may need the person who knows how to think in different contexts and has proven they can adapt, because not everyone will. But I am curious about your second point, because I think it's fascinating how many companies are like go, 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 and how many other companies are like slow, slow, slow.
Well, one reaction to that, actually. So just by coincidence, my wife is actually a consultant at one of the largest consultancies in the world. And I think she's the number 3 search term on writing a white paper for large organizations. She advises large corporations on their adoption of generative AI. And one of her big challenges is like these slow moving, complex organizations that are putting the pause on things. And we often, joke it in our household about how we're moving so fast, we're going to eat some of these larger organizations' lunch. But yeah, to go to my second point, and this is really, I feel, a unique problem. So over the last decade, we've obviously had a tremendous amount of success and growth in the technology sector in the US. And whether it be from the large corporations, the Googles, the non-technology technology companies like the WeWorks, or some of the e-commerce, we've just had this incredible explosion in the technology sector. There's been an massive influx of venture capital. And then over the past 2 years or so, as that's beginning to rationalize, you've had a lot of layoffs. And one of the things that kind of that last decade has resulted in, perhaps you've experienced this as well, is when you're just hiring en masse without a lot of governance around it, you often don't, whether it be encourage or train some of the younger employees in the same disciplines or skills that they would have, or that they should have learned earlier in their career. And so as we are hiring some of these people that unfortunately have either been laid off or just in the job market for whatever reason, we discover that they may not have, some of them have not developed the skills that you would have expected someone to develop when they're 22, 23. A very obvious example of this is in sales and marketing functions, where for the past decade in tech, grow at any cost. You have infinite venture money to go just, spend on giant billboards, on marketing, on very expensive sales personnel. All revenue is good revenue. And that's not actually true from running a business perspective, right? You have to consider what is the cost of winning that revenue. So as we brought on these sales and marketing personnel, we're actually having to train them on what is ROI positive investments in sales and marketing technologies, or people or processes. And that's one of the things kind of we have struggled with or had to invest a lot of time in, because we're hiring people that are in their middle of their career that didn't actually develop this basic skill set that, most other people have developed earlier on in their careers.
I think one of the skill sets, one of the areas in skill development that gets neglected, and I don't know that you can point a finger and say, okay, it gets neglected because of weak onboarding. And when you hire en masse, you tend to have onboarding issues, and onboarding issues really stacks a deck in a negative way against the quality of hire and against retaining talent. To me, if your talent management and your talent retention and onboarding feeds directly into that is good, it's going to help your talent acquisition out a lot. But I think an area of skills people will need to develop if they haven't dealt with business acumen. I think it's not enough anymore, or soon will be not enough anymore, to say, hey, I'm a great developer, or I really understand data science. Okay, but do you understand the value, how it fits into our business model, what we're trying to do? Because there's a difference. I just wrapped up a search for a corporate IT director, growing company. Their IT is a decade behind where it needs to be, and they need somebody to get them where they need to be. And part of the request, part of the brief in on the job related understanding the difference between tasks and responsibilities that are not really what they consider not value add versus those that add value to the enterprise. And I think it's going to be more incumbent on candidates and on companies to promote this, to understand business better. And that can be a double-edged sword, right? Because sometimes you get someone who's very technical, they really understand what they're doing, and they don't want to, I don't know, for example, they may not want to go out and start their own company or innovate for themselves or for another group, right? Because they're afraid. They view all the stuff that is outside of their purview as a barrier to entry, as a moat to guard the castle so they never go do X, whatever X might be. I think there needs to be an embrace in the marketplace, personally, that, hey, you come in here as an employee, yeah, you're going to do your job. And yeah, you're going to contribute. And yeah, we're going to lever your education, prior experience, whatever, but we're also going to add to that. You're going to come out of here stronger, more capable, more skilled than you will by going to our competitor for the same role. I think there needs to be a lot of that attitude developed out in the marketplace.
100% agree. Like, we actually encourage our engineers, whether it be junior or senior, to learn, why are we doing this? Why are we building this machine learning algorithm this way? Why do we care about user engagement? It's not just drive your DAUs or user engagement. You're doing that because it affects this part of our business and makes us stronger as a company. Now, admittedly, not all engineers, or it doesn't have to be just engineers, not all people are interested in that. That's either not their passion or not their skill set. But we certainly try to literally get every single employee, regardless of their department, to understand why we as a business are doing certain things or why their job is valuable to the overall organization.
Well, it's valuable because it makes us money, and the right kind of money.
But how does it make the causal pathway from me writing this feature to the customer adopting it, to the customer using it more, to the customer deriving more value from the software, to it increasing our net retention rate, which increases our lifetime value? That's a long causal pathway that most organizations don't teach you. And we're in a fortunate position where we're small enough where we can invest in teaching even junior employees that skill set or that causal pathway.
Well, and I would say this as well, adding on to that, the notion that we're at a place where we can invest. I don't know how a company can't invest, not be conscientious about it, to set it aside, because if you don't, where are you a year or two or three from now? And because the rate of innovation as it relates to the application of AI, I think, is only I think the drumbeat is increasing. Now, at some point, it'll taper down. It has to. But I think for the next 3 years, give or take, the drums are beating pretty wildly, and they'll keep it up. Let me ask you this. And I know we had kind of a fun conversation before we started recording today about interests and all this other sort of stuff. But I like to ask people, Nick, what's your passion project? It could be work, it could be play, it could be charitable, it could be whatever. But I like to find out what people most want to invest themselves into in terms of, is it entertaining, or do you just drive satisfaction from whatever it might be? And I know I warned you about this before, and it can't be what we were talking about earlier. That's okay. Unless you really wanted to go down that road. And if you do, we could have some fun with it.
Okay. So, I'm a family man. I've got a wife. I've got 2 cats. I've got to do all sorts of house maintenance stuff. But when I'm not, and, a day job, when I'm not doing all of that, I've become, over the past year and a half, a pretty serious poker player. Okay. So I was, I used to work on Wall Street, was very good with risk management, and I'm a mathematician by training. So you combine a competitive personality with being social and extroverted around people, combined with risk management, and you call it with a poker player. So over the past year and a half, I started to, invest a lot in learning how to play poker, put in a lot of hours, started reading the books, then the mathematical simulations, and I've actually gotten pretty good. If the entire tech CEO thing doesn't work out, I could probably go make a living as a professional poker player.
Are we going to see you there at the big table? We're going to see at the big table at tournaments on Ian.
I'm not good enough to do that yet, but when I feel, again, risk management, I know once I'll be good enough, yes, I will. I'll put in the enormous amount of money to enter those big tournaments. I'm not there yet. Give me a couple of years and, fingers crossed I will.
Well, I've got your cell phone. If I happen to be flipping through the TV and I find you going all in, I'm going to start texting you just randomly.
That's actually kind of a joke. I would love to be on one of those big tournaments, all decked out in IdeaScale gear and representing the company on one of those free advertising for us.
You know what's funny? And I don't consider poker a sport. I grew up playing poker, but not Texas Hold'em. It was 5-card draw, 7-card stud. And for many years, we did not have poker chips. We're kind of on the poor side. I mean, if you don't even have poker chips, right? We played with pinto beans, just dry beans. And I thought when I was young, I thought I was so clever. I'd take those beans and I'd really gently kind of off to the side, split them in half and like keep my money up, so to speak. And somehow my grandfather or my uncle or my dad or whoever all ended up with all the beans. And I'm sitting there, man, I'm going to starve. I'm never going to make it being a teenager because I can't even keep the beans on the table. But, I grew up playing it, and I think sometimes about it when doing other things in life, because my dad used it as an opportunity to start teaching me about statistics, probabilities in a rudimentary kind of way. But I think it's really, really interesting because you get into a point where the numbers, where the science and the art overlap, but neither provides clarity for a decision. It takes some risk taking. It takes some, I hope I've got both of these sides of it, the art and the science down pat, because if not, I may be going home.
Yeah. And I'll add on to that. Even if you have the science down pat, and there's situations I've made at a poker table where I've made absolutely the correct mathematical decision, absolutely the correct psychological decision, and yet there's still a fundamental element of luck. You don't know what that next card is going to be, even if you did all the math correctly, and you lose. And you have to deal with the emotional, no one likes losing, right? You have to deal with the emotional consequence of the loss, but also temper yourself within the notion that you did the right thing at every step along the way. And then, or be reflective enough to realize, hey, maybe I didn't do the right thing, and here's where I can learn, how I can learn to avoid this situation in the future.
Well, and you know what I like about it? Of course, I don't want to point anyone to go out and be a gambler, professional, otherwise. I don't do it anymore. I play cards with the family and all this sort of thing, but I outgrew that a long time ago in terms of, as my grandfather used to say, on my dad's side, he said, there's no such thing as a friendly game of poker. And he was raised, his couple generations prior were involved in the Hatfields and McCoys. And so there was nothing friendly about that. And I just but sometimes I think about what you just said, that going along that line of thought, and I would offer this bit of advice or insight for anyone who's maybe entrepreneurially minded or who's a candidate looking for a job. You can do everything right and still come up empty-handed. And you know what? It may not be your fault. And those sorts of things happen. But like you do is you manage your resources, and it's not just money you're managing. Part of your resources is your budget of energy every day, your emotions every day. If you need to, feel like you got punched in the mouth, absorb it, think about it, learn from it, move on to the next one, because you never know when something good is around the corner. It kind of reminds me of the old sales methodology. If I do this enough times to the right audience, somewhere it's going to be the right time and I'm going to get a sale. And I think in some respects, we're kind of moving away from that paradigm, but I think it applies absolutely to a lot of things we do in life. Is we're not necessarily measured by our circumstances or if the right card happened to get turned or given to us underneath and no one knows that we got that third ace or that fourth nine or whatever it is. And I think it's an important message.
Yeah.
Even if art and science match up, you can still get a loss. But you know what? You're judged more on how you respond to that than by the fact that you experienced it.
Yeah. To bring that back to like the business world, we do actually try at IdeaScale to be thoughtful about that. Like there will be features that we release, marketing campaigns that we initiate, or sales conversations that don't work out. And that we try and be very careful and say, separates the outcome from the performance of the person, right? If you do everything right in building a feature, if you use the right process to decide why you're building the feature, you designed it correct, you coded it correct, and it just doesn't take, that's okay. It's not the product person's fault. It's not the engineer's fault. it just move on, right? Did we do what we try and focus very much on the right process, whether it be marketing or engineering or product, rather than evaluate the person on the outcomes. And I think that's resulted in really a happier workplace, right? People know that, hey, it's okay to fail as long as the process that led to that failure was thoughtful and correct.
There you go. I think that's the right attitude to have in any organization and with oneself. And Nick Jain, CEO, IdeaScale, thanks so much for joining me on Drowning in the Tech Talent Pool.
Perfect. Thank you so much, John. I appreciate it.
You've been listening to Drowning in the Tech Talent Pool. This podcast is sponsored by Sabretooth. Sabretooth improves the quality of hire and speeds up the time to fill specialized machine learning, data engineering, data science, and developer roles, stretching tech recruiting budgets further by bringing the precision of retained search and the speed of contingent search to the market in one complete solution. Find out more at sbr2th.com and follow me, John Light, on LinkedIn. Thanks for listening.